Well, we've done all the genres, so we might as well go into the last genre, which we haven't covered, which is hip hop rap in this case, because we're going to do NAS-ILLMATIC from 1994. Big, big album. In the montage, I believe I picked The World Is Yours, and now you're going to hear a little bit of New York State of Mind. All right, Matt, give me the numbers.
All right, Illmatic by Nas comes in at number 11 in the 1990s on Best Ever Albums, number 2 in 1994, number 64 of all time. It's Nas's highest rated album on Best Ever Albums. It's the only album that we're covering tonight that reached Rolling Stone's list at number 44. And Nas is ranked number 106 of overall artists on Best Ever Albums rankings.
So yeah, gonna be trying not to go too long on the bio rate here because we're deep into things, but I don't want to shortchange Nas either. So Nas was born Nasir Jones, so gives you an idea where the Nas comes from the first name there. He was the son of a jazz musician. Olu Dara was the name of his father. He will jump ahead a few years. He actually dropped out of high school in 8th grade. In some ways, guys, I feel like Nas is like if Dangerous Minds was an actual thing, like because he drops out of school, but then he becomes super literate, right? But he learns a lot of it from like the streets and like his own learning, right? Which almost you laugh at because it sounds like a cliche and you're like, but that doesn't actually happen, where it really, and like Nas is like, of course, the exception that proves the rule a little bit, right? Like he goes and like he kind of says he traded classrooms for the streets, but along the way he got interested in art and wordplay. And I think like the possibility of that happening is astronomical. And then of course it always gives that story, like if Nas had been born in the suburbs of Chicago, does he become like Dean's List student who goes to like an Ivy League school? You know what I mean? Some of it's, you know what I'm saying? Does that make sense? Kind of like you always wonder what the origin story would be, depending on where he grew up. But anyway, he drops out in 8th grade and kind of his career, he stumbles into rap a little bit pretty early. He knows he wants to get in there. He has a best friend who's a DJ. It's also his neighbor, Willie Graham. And he starts as Kid Wave, and then he becomes Nasty Nas. At around 15, he meets a producer. And it's kind of like word of mouth with him, right? Like people are picking up his skills. They're hearing him. He's intriguing to folks, and they're passing him sort of up the food chain in terms of people that become gradually more and more important or more and more influential in terms of being able to move him along. So he meets a producer named Large Professor in Queens who introduces him to a group called Main Source. Nas becomes a member of that, which is a pretty common story for a lot of the hip hop artists we're finding, right? That they join a collective, right? And then move from there. That's partially the Tupac story, right? That's how he comes along. You could pretty much say it about NWA if you want, right? Because they were a collective along the way. The Wu-Tang Clan starts as a collective. Busta Rhymes, right, who we've talked about, he's in a collective. So there's all these different people, but same story for Nas, and it's very much like a New York story too. He's in the collective, and people are just liking his flow. He records a debut with them. He's on a song called Live at the Barbecue. You can hear it on an album called Breaking Atoms in 1991 from Main Source. I did listen to that. It is identifiable as Nas from the beginning, so kind of worth looking at if you want to see the formative era there. He does begin to do solo stuff in 1992. He does a track called Halftime for the film Zebrahead. Josh, do you remember that movie, Zebrahead?
No, I don't. Yeah.
You do not remember Zebra. I was wondering. It looks like it's for that. It's a movie produced by Oliver Stone and stars Michael Rappaport and someone named Nabush Wright. Don't know much about it. It's a romantic drama film. I do not remember it at all. I don't even remember seeing it like in the theaters or anything at the time. But anyway, he was on that soundtrack. And does a song called Halftime. That single sort of gets him a level of buzz within the community that leads ultimately to a rap contract. But there's a couple steps there. What rapper do you think most people evoked when they were talking about Nas as like the next generation of this person?
Like Rakim or something?
Yes. exactly. Josh, Rakim he's sort of looked at like as evolutionary Rakim, right, in terms of what he's doing and sound and flow along the ways. But it doesn't immediately lead to a record contract. He gets rejected by Def Jam, most notably, but a couple other smaller labels. He continues, though, to produce tracks still with Willie Graham, now known as Ill Will, maybe back then known as Ill Will, but they're putting stuff together. But unfortunately, Graham actually gets shot and killed in Queensbridge on May 23rd, 1992. Nas's brother is also involved in it, but he survives, and Nas kind of says that was the moment where it was like, holy shit, you know what I mean? I got to get serious about this. In that story that I talked about, how he keeps stumbling into people, he runs into MC Search. You guys remember who MC Search was in?
No.
I do not.
No. Third Base, who we talked about briefly. Pop Goes the Weasel. Shout out there.
As the weasel goes pop.
Yep, and he approaches Nas and says he'd like to work with him, and he does another track, and this time a A&R representative named Faith Newman hears him for Sony, and pretty much he's got a street reputation, but it hasn't translated to an album deal, and that is when the album deal comes to mind. And it comes pretty quickly after that, because then a veritable who's who of producers begin to work with him, most notably Pete Rock and DJ Premier, who we may remember from Gangstar, and we've done a bunch of stuff with Pete Rock as well. And DJ Premier had just come off of Jeru de Damaja, somebody we covered before, his album The Sun Rises in the East. And
Jeru
so
the Damaja.
The Damaja, I'm sorry. I want to say, Damaja, but it's Damaja. I'm sorry. Like doing damage, right? So DJ Premier's instantly a convert on Nas's flow, and they start putting stuff together. And that he kind of says like Search, has continuing to bang the drum, right? Like, you can't pass this up. This is too good. Producers are being brought in, it releases, and it actually doesn't sell tremendously well. The World Is Yours is a buzz clip on MTV. I do remember seeing it on MTV, but it doesn't get a ton of play. And outside of the traditional hip hop areas, you're in New York and certain other big cities, right? It doesn't kind of break into that level of rap where everybody is aware of it, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's big, but it's more big within the scene, and it's also really, really big with critics instantaneously. It's sort of hailed as like a classic in the moment. And Nas becomes one of those prodigies. It's like first album is, we've got a new prodigy, a new king. He's young at this time, and that is sort of how he comes into the world, as sort of a hip-hop prodigy.
Yep.
It actually very similar in some ways to like Eminem's origin story without the Rap Olympics part of it. That's kind of how I processed him, like young guy, known for his flow, hits big right off the bat. I think the only difference is that Eminem had the commercial success a little bit quicker than Nas does. So there's a lot of other stuff. I'll try to weave it into the take if you guys bring stuff up, but and we're going to do some other Nas down the road too. So that's a little bit of an overview for you of Nas. Josh, I think to some degree we're all people who enjoy hip hop, but I would say you're probably the most hip hop head on the show. So what do you think of this one? This, narrative wise, this is considered one of the biggest albums in rap history.
Yes.
Does it hold up for you in that area?
Yeah, absolutely. This was one of the first albums when I was getting into rap that the people would always name check, along with like Biggie and Jay-Z and Dr. Dre and all the other kind of like biggest names. And so I've heard this album many times and heard it early on. And it absolutely holds up this listening as well. In fact, I think I appreciate even more now that we've listened to over the years, all the rap that we've listened to for the show and what I've heard since then. He just has such a command and authority with his rapping that I really appreciate. He raps with confidence. I said this before, but I'll say it again. I always like when a rapper on his album as it's just him most of the time. No like hiding behind guest stars and stuff. And I feel like, with the exception of like AZ being on a couple tracks and Q-Tip kind of, being the chorus for One Love, that it's really just him. So you can see his command with like words and painting a picture is really strong on this. I got a lot of how I felt listening to the Biggie album that I did with this. Although it's he raps about different things. He is not as much about, he doesn't really rap about crime a lot. And he's not really kind of...
It's a secondary character,
yeah,
I'd say. Josh,
it's not like his
it,
personality.
yeah.
And it's not... He's also not in the way the Biggie is talking about, like, having a lot of women and stuff. It's much more, like, street level in a lot of ways, too. Just kind of more, like, stories about, I don't know, his coming up and his life. I don't know. It's just got a different tone. It's pretty serious, but he also... he throws in some pop culture references too. He's not, I don't think he's like taking himself too seriously, if that makes sense, but he's also not like jokey. He's pretty, straight ahead, in his rapping. I think the samples on this are excellent. And that's like half of the battle with making a great, rap album. Right from New York State of Mind. I think some of these samples have been used over and over again on later albums. I feel like I've either heard this album a lot that I kept thinking like other artists have used even lines of his and other things, like in Life's a Bitch and The World Is Yours. The songs are just very familiar with me. There's not really a weak track on this album. And it finishes off with sampling Michael Jackson on It Ain't Hard to Tell. That's a pretty memorable or recognizable sample. But yeah, this is... I also always respect that he has an album called Nostradamus, which I always thought was hilarious. And I think I've always known him too as his rap beef with Jay-Z and the tracks that they traded back and forth with that. That was kind of the time period when I started listening. So that's what I associate him with as well. But yeah, I think he's an excellent rapper. This is a fantastic debut album. And this is definitely up there as one of the great rap albums of the 90s. So thumbs up for me.
I was excited to get to this record because it's something that I've heard. I have a couple of friends that are really into rap, and this is an album that they both are like very high on and talk about one of the best ever. So I was like, okay, and I always knew Nas from, did he do like a Lauryn Hill song, like If I Rule the World or whatever?
Right. That's a Curtis Blow beat that goes over. That's That's like the Nas song that I know. And I actually knew Represent because when that song came on, one of those friends put it on a mix for me. So I did know that song. Never heard this album.
Correct.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. No, never heard this album. And since I was joking with him, I was texting him like, "Hey guys, I'm going to listen to this record called "ILLMATIC" by Nas. You guys might not have heard of it. I heard it's pretty good. You might want to check it out." So yeah, I was excited to get to this, and I was at first, I would say, surprised. I'm like, this is only 39 minutes, so I was excited. I was like, holy crap, because now we're like mid 90s. Like not just rap, but all albums are just going really long. Rap albums in particular, with like all these skits and all these things that are very of the time. I guess the opening track is probably like that's as much of a skit as you're going to get. So that's not
like
really
an intro.
It's like it's like an intro. It's like a minute and a half, and it's just guys talking. It's Nas, kind of. There's no rapping happening yet, right? So it's kind of in a sense, it's not really a song. Like the other ones are. So so I was surprised at that. And I was also surprised that it's, like, as you mentioned, Josh, this is mostly just Nas, right? It does say featuring like that One Love. It says featuring Q-Tip, but then I'm like, is it really featuring Q-Tip if all he's doing is saying One Love? Like that's all he's not rapping. He's just saying One Love. That's all he's doing, And like you said, the only time that I picked up somebody, was it Life's a Bitch? Like there's the first verse.
Yeah. Easy.
And then I got through the album, and my thought was, why didn't Nas just take that verse? Like why is you know what I mean? Like what was the point of that?
Yeah, some people say AZ was better on him on that track than he was.
I don't know. I mean, far be it from me. I can't say I'm the utmost authority on MCs and flow and all that stuff. I really liked Nas's flow. I thought he. And I did sit down. I was able to sit down and like look at the lyrics, this week, and I'm like, just reading them as he's just rifling them off, and I'm just like, holy crap, this guy's like on fire here,
Yeah.
And half the time I'm like, I don't know exactly what he's saying, but I like the wordplay, I like the connection of the words, and he's saying interesting things, and even though I don't know always what he's talking about, there's certainly some street slang that I'm not going to know anyway, but there's also references to certain things, and that's one of the more interesting things about hip hop is that they're just some of the verses and the bars that these guys are doing. It's just like, wow, it's just that they're throwing off, and he's just I love his voice. He's just got this really smooth flow voice. You guys talked about, I think it was Onyx last week. That was one of the songs my biggest complaint about that was like, it's so aggressive, like they're just like. And I was gonna say, I don't like that. Like, I like a smoother, I like a Snoop, I like a Q-Tip, I like a Nas. That's I much prefer that type of that type of flow, that type of style, than something that's way more harsh or aggressive or in your face or whatever. And it's just, and so I really appreciate it about this. So like his voice, like his flow, wordplay. I like the production. You said that. Yeah, Josh. To me, this was a good mixture. This is very jazzy, so this in some ways it reminds me of like very much like a Tribe Called Quest type of sound, where you've got this like these horns, like a jazzy kind of beat or riff that's kind of going on in the background, or the piano, right? There's a lot of cool piano parts in here. There's also a gritty nature to the production. It's got it's very, since he's talking about the streets so much, it's the sonic aspect of this record very much matches up with that.
Yeah, you hear like the actual like samples with like kind of the fuzz or static at times and things.
Yeah,
like
I think you mentioned it, well, maybe last week or something about it's like the record player. It's like the hissy nature of that record player, the worn nature of it, right? And I like that, right? I think that's kind of it gives it a little bit of heft. But I also think that this has. It sounded to me like why I really like some of the Tribe stuff. I think as a whole, I think that there's a little bit more heft here than some of the Tribe songs are still a little bit more stripped down, still a little bit more basic. But this is kind of like, to me, this is like a good marriage of kind of like that jazzy rap, kind of hip hop elements, along with a more fully formed production style. Of more mid 90s, whether it's East Coast or West Coast rap, but it's like a fuller sound. And I really liked the kind of the putting together of those two things. And it's interesting kind of like comparing this with other New York rap, particularly we just did Biggie Smalls a couple weeks back or whatever. Which is another album that I very much liked. But what I liked better about this is I don't have the misogyny is not quite as much as there, right? The overt, the lyrics are. I can listen to this more. One of my complaints about that was I can't just listen to that record in my house or like in public. This is an album, even though it's not like it's totally clean. There's clearly curse words and N words and stuff like that thrown in there, but there's a different feel to it though. It seems it's not as overt. It's not as out in front, and it's a little bit more tucked away. It's like part of it. It doesn't override anything at any point in time, which I feel like sometimes that's what happens with Biggie or Dre or Snoop. It's like it's just over the top sometimes. It's like, all right, guys, but this I like this tempered down nature of it a little bit more. It helps me to enjoy it. Helps me get that replayability that you guys talk about a lot. So, so for all those reasons, I mean, it's hard for me to say, like, I know that I'm reading this is very influential. I'm not exactly sure why. I don't know exactly what rappers did after this record that were so.
Don't worry, Matt. I'll get into that.
There you go. So, but what I can tell you is that, like, just listen. Like, the part of it's the brevity, part of it's just his flow, part of it's just the combination of the way the production's being done, and it just. Yeah, it really kind of fit together for me. So I can see why it is popular. So yeah, it was thumbs up for me.
I think you can see kind of the Eric B. and Rakim comparison too, probably.
I can see that too.
Yeah.
Yes.
So definitely.
Well, famously one of my favorite hip hop acts of all time, Eric B. and Rakim solo stuff. But yeah, this album has sort of always been around for me. I've mentioned many times I grew up near New York City, and in some ways Nas is of that second gen of New York performers outside the originators, right? I guess you could say third because there's two layers of originators, right? Yeah. I think it's either him or Biggie, right? That gets the big crown in this era, but to me they're very different. And Notorious B.I.G.'s larger than life, whereas to me Nas in some ways is the distillation of the everyman in New York to some degree, the realist, right? To take a term. Matt, you're asking like what makes this album so great, and it's important. Like I think in the history of hip hop, but also like 1994.
More influential, not necessarily great, but influential.
Well, it's
I
both.
guess.
It's like I'm gonna go out and say it's both. It's great and it's influential. And
no, but I could say like I understand why it's great. I'm
Right.
just I guess specifically like what were rappers doing after this that they weren't doing before it that Nas directly influenced?
What I'm saying, what makes it is Nas is able to write something that has all the grit of the streets, right? Like that's, but like Josh said, it's not talking about supposedly things that we're supposed to think of as like the code of the streets, right? Like talking about unvarnished violence, drugs, sex. I mean, it's here, but it's basically like, well, yeah, I mean, it's hard for me not to tell like life stories or autobiographical stories without it because it's around, right? But it's around in the way that like if you walk down the street and it's there, you're aware of it, but you don't want to sort of mire in it, right? Flow wise, he's both of another era in that there's a schematic to his rapping that's like a Rakim, right? And a confidence and a clear New Yorkness to it, and the confidence and the very masculine like huskiness of how he raps, but also the production just clears out, right? It's like they push everybody to the sides and it commands you to sort of listen to his voice, whether it be the fact that there's almost no side pieces or that the beats, even though they're good, they don't do anything to overwhelm the story he's telling. Yeah. And I think he's the gateway into 90s hip hop in some ways.
It's not flashy, really.
He's conscious enough to be at the top tier of consciousness hip hop, right? Or the jazz hip hop, right? He's tough enough that he can be right up there with any of the most street or the toughest things. He's literate enough, right, that his lyrics have heft and are not too esoteric, but they're also not so obscure that they're just a bunch of, referential points, right? It's just... he's all the things, right? Like he packs it together into this. His flow is distinctive. One of the things that really is coming across that if I want to go old head right now in terms of new stuff is I do miss 90s hip hop in the sense that all of these MCs are sort of like superheroes and that they all have their own personas and skills and they're instantly recognizable. It was almost, you wanted to burnish your own flow and your own persona, and I really do miss something like that in hip hop. That there was just seemed to be a little bit more character and originality in terms of how you were as an MC, right, along the way. And I think somewhere along the line, hip hop became beats, and then the MCs were sort of in the secondary. I feel like that started toward the end of the 2010s, and this is peak MC period right here. You just have you had great beats, but the beats were secondary to the MCs.
I think rap 2 gets into like I don't know if this answers your question, Matt, but like it becomes more flashy and like money focused and like lifestyle and like and all like bigger than life type of things.
But
like
also
John was saying,
big beats and big hooks.
Yeah, like if you think about some of the Puffy like tracks and stuff like that too.
Yes.
I guess what I like about him too, Matt, I don't know if this answers your question, but like there's a gravitas and like an understatedness to him and his delivery that I really appreciate. And I think like I don't know, it feels more pure in a way in terms of rapping.
Well, and it seems like too. I picking up a little bit what John was saying. He's hitting on so many different elements that sometimes a rapper might just be one, maybe two of a thing, but he's kind of like embodying a variety of different things and like doing them all really well and making you believe it and not necessarily like faking anything. That he's just able to kind of like draw upon a variety of different things at once. Which that certainly stands out for sure.
Yeah.
He's kind of like to give you another analogy, Matt, he's kind of like we would joke about the Strokes in that they're so tight as a band that all they really need to be is just super fucking tight and cool. And they don't need really anything else beyond that. That's like what drives it. And that's kind of what Nas is. He doesn't need big fucking beats. He doesn't need a larger than life persona or shock value or stuff. He just is sort of there.
Yeah.
And he's got all of this gravitas and presence that he doesn't need it. And later on, even songs I loved in the early 2000s, you know, even stuff with good flow, it always had these huge hooks, right? And it was just big beats, and it was great. And it was great for the dance floor, but sometimes you lost a little bit of the art of it, right? And like we're in a really good period of hip hop now, because I know you kept mentioning Tribe Called Quest, but we've done a lot recently, whether it be Common, you know what I mean, was in there. You know, we've got Nas here, Biggie and stuff. It's a lot of people standing. Yeah, a lot of people just standing with just what they have as their craft, and there still is a like almost like an academic element to it. And I just like that Nas doesn't, on this album, he doesn't rely on any bullshit. It's just him and like the talent he has, and he's like a rookie, a prospect who's raw but is shockingly a finished product at the same time. He's both. It's like you have all the expectation for what he can be, but he's also shockingly polished for where he's at in the game. And that's how I look at this album. I also love like his the way he puts together bars, right? And couplets in particular. Like I love how he puts like words like Schweppervescence and stuff like that in different stuff. And, you know, it's just such a cool way because he talks about having the essence, you know, of Schweppervescence and stuff like that. It just, Halftime is such a great song. It's the song that broke him, and you can see why. It's a lot of references, but he says, you know, King Poetic, too much flavor, I'm major, Atlanta ain't braver, I'll pull a number like a pager, you know, just that sort of that trickle down flow and the use of different types of rhyme schemes is something I really appreciate about him. A couple songs I've always loved would be Life's a Bitch and Memory Lane. Those are two songs that I just remember revisiting quite a bit. If it didn't have the like name check out to like everybody he knew in his crew at the end, Represent would also be top tier for me because I just love that. I love that One Time for Your Mind and Represent beat back to back. Those are two beats that have enough substance that you nod your head, but once again, they never get in the way of the overriding theme, which is his flow. And rarely do things that get talked about as big albums or formative things when you get to them, you know, kind of live up to it. But if you're at all someone who doesn't just listen to hip hop for the lifestyle or just beats that overwhelm the rap part of it, which if you do, God bless. But to me, that's a different type of hip hop. Like if you're at all interested in the craft of rapping, like this is for you. And I do want to end with this. I think this is what it's important. I almost like to call this rap instead of hip hop, because I think hip hop has become so much stuff that it's everything and nothing at the same time. And I do feel like I want to start using like rap a little bit more to differentiate like MC driven, you know, pieces of hip hop within it, almost like a subgenre within hip hop, right? So this to me is rap, you know what I mean? And couched in the story of hip hop. And, you know, I don't know if that's politically incorrect or, you know, because I know sort of it's like hip hop, it's supposed to be all the things, the culture and the clothes and stuff. But I do like to draw out that like some lyrical and verses, right, are better than others. And I do want to like have a way to like name check that, you know, within the genre, right? And that's why I kind of tease this out as rap within the hip hop genre, because it's the highest level of that. So for those that haven't listened though, and in any way consider yourself to be a hip hop fan, like it would be shocking to me if you haven't stumbled into this, but if you're a younger person or you're sort of like rap neutral, like you don't listen to a lot of it, this would be one of the ones to check out.
Yeah. And I would say too, like I still think in light of what you said, John, I still think that there's really good beats on here too. I think the song
there
New
are.
York State of Mind Halftime represents one of my favorites. I get what you say about the end of it, like all the calling out. It's kind of like for a guy that's like just throwing all these different words together, this play, these rhyme schemes, and then at the end he's just like, and then this guy, and then you call all the call outs. I get how that might not be as appealing, but like I love that beat. That's just really great. So the beats might not be as flashy as some like certainly like some of the West Coast stuff that like, you know, Dre and Snoop and Ice Cube were doing, but like there's still really good beats on here on top of that, which you know certainly is something that I gravitate towards.
Well, all of you have a cavalcade of excellent producers on this album. So like DJ Premier, Large Professor, Pete Rock, and
but it just goes to show that what a good beat is doesn't have to be one thing. You know what I mean? There's a lot of different ways you can have a good beat. This is a more subtle use
Yeah, it doesn't have to be like a funk sample like the West
Right.
Coast
Right,
style,
right.
basically.
or all bass,
Yeah.
you know.
Also, Illmatic is a great album title, one of the all-timers.
Yes.
And then when you make an album called Stillmatic, that's
Stillmatic,
just like
yeah.
cherry on the top right there.
Yeah. So yeah, strong recommendation from you on this one.